The Royal Marines are Britain's elite fighting force. Trained and equipped to wage war anytime, anywhere. These guys bring the pain in any terrain. Rewind to the early 19th century, and the Royal Marines sailed the seven seas with the British fleet. Acting as on-ship security, they had to be tough and disciplined. In 1815, after Napoleon's French army was defeated, the Royal Marines were given the task of guarding him as he was taken to exile. Asked to inspect his British captors, Napoleon commented, "Much might be done with 100,000 men such as these." Napoleon was right.
The Royal Marines would use well-trained units which can do a variety of jobs. They can either be inserted amphibiously or they can be put in by helicopter. And they can actually operate in a variety of different sorts of terrain.
Fighting in all environments demands firearms that can cope with extreme conditions and a lot of abuse. In World War II, the Royal Marines were issued with the British Rifle Classic, a .303 caliber legend that would prove to be every bit as tough as the Marine carrying it, the Lee Enfield. Over 100 years old, it's one old-timer you wouldn't want to tangle with.
The Enfield rifle is probably considered by most experts as one of the best military bolt-action service rifles ever issued. A rugged gun, an incredibly reliable gun. For example, it feeds from a 10-round box magazine that was charged with stripper clips, 5-round stripper clips, very quick to load. As far as cycling action, you can imagine cycling action on a gun when it fired, very simple to cycle the action and get another round in the gun. It worked very quickly.
The Royal Marines were able to get rounds down at a pulverizing pace, a skill they enhanced through a legendary drill of furious bolt and trigger action.
The British Marines trained to a standard of 15 aimed rounds a minute. And with this, there's no problem in meeting that. In fact, the Royal Marines could do about 30 rounds a minute.
This devastating volley of fire was named the Mad Minute.
Imagine, if you will, a battalion of perhaps 800 men in fire positions, each of them firing 15 rounds a minute. And these are men who are capable of hitting a man-sized target most times at 600 yards. I mean, the Mad Minute from an infantry battalion would present what the great cliche wall of fire really means.
When the Germans ran across the British Marines, they thought they were being shot at with machine gun fire rather than rifle fire.
The mud, rain, grit, and snow of European operations never proved too tough for the Lee Enfield. But in Asian theaters where jungle prevailed, a few modifications were needed.
The Royal Marines specialised in what became known as out-of-area operations, which basically meant you went somewhere really, really hot in places like Malaya. And in order to patrol there, well, helicopters help in the jungle, but essentially you do 99% of what you're going to do in the jungle on foot.
The Royal Marines trained for up to 6 months in the jungle, sweating it out in humid, itchy, searingly hot conditions. It's an environment they have learned to thrive in.
Before you worry about the enemy in the jungle, you have to worry about looking after yourself. It's really warm in the jungle. There's lots to drink. If you know where to look, there's lots to eat. And when the sun sets, it is literally pitch dark.
June 1948, Malaya. Communist guerrillas rise up against their colonial British masters. A war of terror explodes, a jungle war, and the Royal Marine Commandos are right in the heart of it.
Malaya was a war of patrols and ambushes and jungle skills. And it's exactly the thing that Royal Marine Commandos were very good at.
To mount these ambushes, the Royal Marines needed a rifle that was shorter and lighter than the standard Lee Enfield.
This is a gun that was designed based off of the input that the British were getting from their troops in the Far East. that the heavier number 1 Mark III was just too big, too long, too bulky in a jungle environment, too heavy to carry around, and they wanted a lighter carbine, hence the name Jungle Carbine.
The new Jungle Carbine was a rumble in the jungle knockout champ. It was 4 inches shorter than the standard Lee Enfield. The bolt knob was drilled out to lose weight. A flash suppressor and a rubber butt pad were added to help absorb the increased recoil.
Number 5 Mark I Jungle Carbine is kind of the last of the Lee Enfield series. Saw limited service and really was coming into service the same time that a full-size battle rifle would be more applicable.
After its jungle boogie in Malaya, the carbine and the Lee Enfield clan it derived from were phased out. The 1950s saw the Lee Enfield replaced as the standard British rifle by the SLR, the self-loading rifle. It was Britain's first semi-automatic, and the Royal Marines quickly took a shine to it.
This is the SLR, the self-loading rifle, or L1A1, a semi-automatic 7.62 millimeter gas-operated weapon. This is sort of the standard weapon of the Royal Marines well up into the 80s. A very, very, very good weapon.
Like the Lee Enfield, the SLR had to fight in the wildest, remotest battlefields on Earth. Battlefields like the Falkland Islands. The Falklands are a small group of British-owned islands situated in the southern Atlantic Ocean. When Argentina invaded the islands in 1982, the Royal Marines sailed halfway around the world to take the fight on. It would be a fascinating matchup. The Brits and the Argentinians were both packing SLRs. Only difference, one side had the fully auto version.
The SLR that the Royal Marines were using is a semi-automatic weapon. Every time you pull the trigger, it fires 1 round. The Argentinians had the FAL version, but theirs was fully automatic.
Having a full auto capability means lots of lead, but it comes at the price of accuracy. And Marines are all about accuracy.
Firing an SLR on automatic, I think you'd just do for fun or in a Rambo movie. The muzzle climb would be so big that the first shot would be the only one actually going in the direction of where you're aiming.
When you fire the SLR fully automatic, the first round is there, the second round's there, the third round's there, and anything after that, it's an anti-aircraft gun.
The Royal Marine Commandos were not going to let rate of fire beat them. They took the fight to the Argentinians on a quality, not quantity basis. This was a war that they were born for. Leading their tactical charge was Brigadier Julian Thompson.
Major General Julian Thompson, then Brigadier Thompson, is a first-rate technician. He was able to land his force quickly and then establish a base and then operate out of that base to retake the Falkland Islands.
But Thompson and the Royal Marine Commandos weren't just fighting the Argentinians. They were also fighting a completely unwelcoming and alien environment.
It is a very inhospitable place and a difficult place to operate in. Very wet, wind blows a huge amount, mountainous, rocky, and peat bog, which is very spongy, wet, impossible to drive across in a wheeled vehicle.
The environment was very harsh, and the logistics problems were great. Basically, the British troops had what they could carry. They had to march something like 90 miles from San Carlos, where the landing had taken place, to Port Stanley to actually fight the battles. And they did that, virtually carrying everything on their back.
Because of our training, we were able to cope with this, able to cope with conditions that many troops would have found totally defeated them and made them totally useless.
Battling through icy winds, snow, and bullets, the British smashed the Argentines. In 10 weeks of intense action, the superior weapon skills of the Marines and their SLRs shone through.
The Falklands War was won not so much by superior technology, but by small groups of determined men who wanted to make a difference, and that might almost be a description of Royal Marines.